Hi, and welcome to Kids in a Blanket, a podcast made by kids for kids who love to read and for parents who don't have the time to read to them.
Welcome to our 10th episode. Today we'll be reading books about strong girls. We'll be reading Olivia, Madeline, and Rosie, Revere, Engineer. Make sure to listen to the end when we tell our joke of the day.
Olivia.
Written by Ian Falconer.
This is Olivia. She is good at lots of things. She is very good at wearing people out. She even wears herself out. Olivia has a brother named Ian. He's always copying. Sometimes Ian just won't leave her alone, so Olivia has to be firm. Olivia lives with her mother, her father, her brother, her dog, Harry, and Edwin, the cat. In the morning, after she gets up and moves the cat and brushes her teeth and combs her ears and moves the cat, Olivia gets dressed. She has to try on everything. On sunny days, Olivia likes to go to the beach. She feels it's important to come prepared. Last summer, when Olivia was little, her mother showed her how to make sandcastles. She got pretty good. Sometimes Olivia likes to bask in the sun. When her mother sees that she'd had enough, they go home. Every day, Olivia is supposed to take a nap.
It's time for your you-know-what,
her mother says. Of course, Olivia's not at all sleepy. On rainy days, Olivia likes to go to the museum. She heads straight for her favorite picture. Olivia looks at it for a long time. What could she be thinking? But there's one painting Olivia just doesn't get. I could do that in about 5 minutes, she says to her mother. As soon as she gets home, she gives it a try. Time out. After a nice bath and a nice dinner, it's time for bed. But of course, Olivia's not at all sleepy. Only 5 books tonight, Mommy, she says.
No, Olivia, just 1.
How about 4?
2.
3.
Oh, all right, 3. But that's it.
When they finish reading, Olivia's mother gives her a kiss and says,
You know, you really wear me out, but I love you anyway.
And Olivia gives her a kiss back and says, I love you anyway, too.
This episode is sponsored by our favorite charity, Donors Choose, an online charity that helps classrooms in need. Visit donorschoose.org/kidsinablanket to make a donation to a classroom requesting books like the ones we read on this podcast.
Madeline
by Ludwig Bemelmans.
In an old house in Paris that was covered with vines lived 12 little girls in 2 straight lines. In 2 straight lines, they broke their bread and brushed their teeth and went to bed. They smiled at the good and frowned at the bad, and sometimes they were very sad. They left the house at 9:30 in 2 straight lines, in rain or shine. The smallest one was Madeline. She was not afraid of mice. She loved winter and snow and ice. To the tiger in the zoo, Madeline just said, Pooh, pooh. And nobody knew so well how to frighten Miss Clavell. In the middle of one night, Miss Clavell turned on her light and said,
Something is not right.
Little Madeline sat in bed, cried, and her eyes were red. And soon after Dr. Cone came, he rushed out to the phone and dialed,
Danton 10-6. Nurse,
he said.
It's an appendix.
In a car with a red light, they drove out into the night. Madeline woke up 2 hours later in a room with flowers. Madeline soon ate and drank. In her bed there was a crank, and a crack on the ceiling had the habit of sometimes looking like a rabbit. One nice morning, Miss Clavell said,
"Isn't this a fine day to visit Madeline?"
tiptoeing with solemn face, with some flowers and a vase. In they walked and then said,
Ah.
when they saw the toys and candy and the dollhouse from Papa. But the biggest surprise by far on her stomach was a scar. Goodbye, they said. We'll come again. And the little girls left in the rain. They went home and broke their bread, brushed their teeth, and went to bed. In the middle of the night, Miss Clavell turned on the light and said,
"Something is not right."
And afraid of a disaster, Miss Clavell ran fast and faster. And she said,
"Please, children, do tell me what is troubling you."
and all the little girls cried, "Boo-hoo! We want to have our appendix out too."
Good night, little girls. Thank the Lord you are well, and now go to sleep,
said Miss Clavell, and she turned out the light and closed the door. And that's all there is. There isn't any more. Rosie Revere, Engineer, by Andrea Beatty.
This is a story of Rosie Revere, who dreamed of becoming a great engineer. In Lila Greer's classroom at Blue River Creek, young Rosie sat shyly, not daring to speak. But when no one saw her, she peeked in the trash for treasures to add to her engineer stash. And late at night, Rosie rolled up her sleeves and built in her hideaway under the eaves. Alone in her attic, the moon high above, dear Rosie made gadgets and gizmos she loved. And when she grew sleepy, she hid her machines far under the bed where they'd never be seen. When Rosie was young, she had not been so shy. She worked with her hair swooping over one eye and made fine inventions for uncles and aunts, a hot dog dispenser and helium pants. The uncle she loved most was zookeeper Fred. She made him a hat to keep snakes off his head, from parts of a fan and some cheddar cheese spray, which everyone knows keeps the pythons away. And when it was finished, young Rosie was proud, but Fred slapped his knee and he chuckled out loud. He laughed till he wheezed, and his eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who stood there embarrassed, perplexed, and dismayed. She looked at the cheese hat and then looked away.
"I love it,"
Fred hooted.
"Oh, truly, I do."
But Rosie Revere knew that could not be true. She stuck the cheese hat on the back of her shelf, and after that day kept her dreams to herself. And that's how it went until one autumn day, her oldest relation showed up for a stay. Her great-great-aunt Rose was a true dynamo who'd worked building airplanes a long time ago. She told Rosie tales of the things she had done and goals she had checked off her list one by one. She gave a sad smile as she looked to the sky.
The only thrill left on my list is to fly, but time never lingers as long as it seems. I'll chalk that one up to an old lady's dream.
That night, as Rosie lay wide-eyed in bed, a daring idea crept into her head. Could she build a gizmo to help her aunt fly? She looked at the cheese hat and said,
"No, not I."
But questions are tricky, and some hold on tight, and this one kept Rosie awake through the night. So when dawn approached and red streaks lit the sky, young Rosie knew just how to make her aunt fly. She worked and she worked till the day was half gone, then hauled her cheese copter out onto the lawn to give her invention a test just to see the ridiculous flop it might turn out to be. Strapped in the cockpit, she flipped on the switch. The helio cheese copter sputtered and twitched. It floated a moment and whirled round and round, then froze for a heartbeat and crashed on the ground. Then Rosie heard laughter and turned round to see the old woman laughing and slapping her knee. She laughed till she whizzed and her eyes filled with tears, all to the horror of Rosie Revere, who thought,
Oh, never, not ever again will I try to build something, to sputter or spin, or build with a lever, a switch or a gear, and never will I be a great engineer.
She turned round to leave, but then Great-Great-Aunt Rose grabbed hold of young Rosie and pulled her in close and hugged her and kissed her and started to cry.
You did it! Hooray! It's the perfect first try. The great flop is over. It's time for the next.
Young Rosie was baffled, embarrassed, perplexed.
I failed,
said dear Rosie.
It's just made of trash. Didn't you see it? The cheese copter crashed.
Yes,
said her great aunt.
It crashed, that is true. But first, it did just what it needed to do. Before it crashed, Rosie, before that, it flew. Your brilliant first flop was a raging success. Come on, let's get busy and on to the next.
She handed a notebook to Rosie Revere, who smiled at her aunt as it all became clear. Life might have its failures, but this was not it. The only true failure can come if you quit. They worked till the sun sneaked away to its bed. Aunt Rose tied her headscarf around Rosie's head and sent her to sleep with a smile ear to ear, to dream the bold dreams of a great engineer. At Blue River Creek, all the kids in grade 2 build gizmos and gadgets and doohickeys too. With each perfect failure, they all stand and cheer, but none quite as proudly as Rosie Revere.
And now for the joke of the day. What did one firefly say to the other? You glow, girl. Thanks for listening, and make sure to subscribe to Kids in a Blanket podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Kids in a Blanket podcast was hosted by Lucas, Ellie, and Ethan Immerman. Sound engineering by Ethan Immerman. Original song and editing by Lucas Immerman. And production by Ellie Immerman.